Public Engagement in Democracy, Focusing on Tanzania by Las Vegas. We will use survey research to try and answer the question about what factors influence citizens' engagement in the democratic process in Tanzania. We will employ the Afrobarometer from 2005 and 2006 dataset, again focusing on Tanzania. The sample size for the survey is 1,277. The tests to be used are cross-tabulation, Cronbach alpha for the reliability analysis, Kendall's tau B, and Kramer's V to measure levels of association where appropriate, and finally chi-square for statistical significance. Our dependent variable will measure the concept of public engagement in the democratic process.
Our research has suggested a number of factors that may influence citizens' involvement in the democratic process. Robert Matz and Michael Bratton have suggested that awareness and education levels are directly linked to increased civic participation in Africa. Tonique Marwatona agrees and adds that social engagement amongst all age groups, and especially with youths, is crucial. In addition to education, Mbaya Kankwendo argues that poverty, hunger, and civic participation are very closely linked. And we know from Andrew Maguire and other scholars that Tanzania in particular is on its way to increased democracy. Our dependent variable measuring engagement in democracy is an index we created from 5 indicators: what the respondent thought of democracy, whether the respondent had attended a community meeting, worked together to raise an issue with others, contact their local or national representatives. This index proved reliable, with a Cronbach's alpha score of 0.6723. Both its kurtosis and skewness are well below 3, suggesting a conventional shape, and its standard deviation of 0.842 is in line with normal variation.
We created 3 hypotheses to measure the effects of 3 separate independent variables. The first variable is age, then education, and finally poverty. The first hypothesis, after 18 years of age, the younger the respondent, the more engaged they were with democracy. Secondly, the more educated the respondent, the more engaged they were with democracy. And finally, the poorer the respondent, the less engaged they were with democracy. And for all 3 variables, the null hypothesis is that there were no relations between the independent variables and our dependent variable.
Our first cross-tabulation shows engagement with democracy by age of the respondent. Our chi-squared test yields a p-value of 0.00000, showing that these results are statistically significant. Since this crosstab compares ordinal and nominal data, Kramer's V is the appropriate measure of association. It yields a value of 0.15602, suggesting some association. As we see in the lead diagonal, the relationship is positive.
For the second cross-tabulation, it shows engagement with democracy by education of the respondent. Our chi-squared test yields a value of 0.00000. This is statistically significant. This cross-tabulation deals with ordinal data, and so Kendall's tau B is appropriate measure of association, where the value is 0.16597. This shows a weak positive association.
Our third and final crosstab shows engagement with democracy by poverty. Once again, tau B is the appropriate measure of association. The value of negative 0.06737 suggests an extremely weak negative association. In addition, the p-value of 0.18057 indicates that this association is not statistically significant.
Let us summarize our results. Both age and education showed statistically significant values, but shared weak positive associations with political engagement. This shows the older and more educated the respondent, the more engaged they were with democracy. However, our third independent variable, poverty, showed a very weak association that was not statistically significant. It's important to note that none of our independent variables had a strong association with our dependent variable. Our hypothesis for age was false, education was correct, and for poverty, the null hypothesis cannot be rejected.
It is probable that other factors have an effect on the democratic engagement of Tanzanians. Some of these could potentially include family status, location, either rural or urban, gender, and ethnicity. The results from our analysis correspond with the literature in regards to the relationship between age, education, and engagement in democracy. However, they differ in regards to poverty in that we did not find a statistically significant association between poverty and political engagement. A key note from our finding is that, unlike our hypothesis, both education and age exhibited positive relationships with democratic engagement. This suggests that in order to increase democratic engagement in Tanzania, it is possible that a good idea would be to engage youths outside of the education system instead of just inside the education system as ages get progressively older.